Do you often find yourself screaming at your child, hoping that they will respond to your request? Or if they misbehave, do you scream because you want them to respect you? Well, parenting experts say screaming doesn't help. They say it doesn't help us and it doesn't help the children. Joining me to talk about this is Nancy Cupolo, owner and consultant for Children First. Thank you so much for joining me today, Nancy.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Now, why is it that screaming is not a good idea?
Well, first and foremost, I think we need to keep in mind that the child has a physiological reaction to screaming. That biological research has proven that when we are under stress, we release cortisol into our brain, and the brain actually kills brain cells. So as you're screaming at your child, their stress level rises, and therefore their brain cells are being diminished.
Wow.
And certainly our opportunity is always for our children to be able to be learners.
And it's not effective.
No, not effective at all. What happens is if we continue to scream or threaten our child, that gradually the child just tunes out completely to that.
So what should parents do then?
Well, instead of screaming, what I usually recommend is the parent thinking about timing themselves out instead of the child. One mother of 7, for example, simply went into her bathroom and threw cold water onto her face, and when she came out, her 7 children were there and they said, "Mom, are you okay?" And it was a totally different reaction.
And she felt better.
She felt much better, and so did they, because now she had their undivided attention and she could tell them what she wanted instead of screaming at what they did or didn't do.
And what are some other examples? I know she put her head underwater, but what other examples do you recommend? I mean, other things that parents should do in order to help them take that time out?
Well, I think sometimes, too, writing a note to your child, sometimes even mailing a letter to your child in the old-fashioned U.S. mail system.
Really?
And telling them all the things that you enjoy about them at their particular age, at 7, 8, 9 years of age, for example, and then also some tasks that you'd like them to take on this week on behalf of the entire family. So they don't see themselves as just doing it for no reason at all, but I actually am doing this because it benefits everyone that I live with.
And how do you, you're a consultant, do you often go to their homes and try to help the parents and the children? Like how does that work?
Usually what I do is I would go into the home to work with the parent, and I try to go in before the screaming actually occurs to see what precipitates that particular situation. There's usually something that presets the parent so that the situation begins to escalate, and the child as well. So I would go in and simply maybe do an environmental check, as I call it, looking around the home to see what could trigger a possible adversive relationship between a parent and a child, and then I try to give suggestions accordingly.
And based on your experience from dealing with so many parents, what are some of the things that trigger the parents to take it out on the children and just scream, thinking that, you know, they're going to be accomplishing what they want to with the screaming?
Well, I think sometimes the parent has an agenda. I come home after a long day at work and I'd like the toys picked up, or I'd like the dishes done. Well, the child has a totally different agenda, because the child looks and says, why do the dishes? Because we're only going to use them again tomorrow. Why pick up the toys? Because they're going to be there again for us. And so I say to the parent, we have to remember that our agendas are totally different, and what we have to do is make sure that what we're requesting of the child is fun for the child to do, and that the child has some control over it. So I may offer 2 or 3 different ways in which we could pick up the toys. I also always want to make sure that I model the behavior myself. It isn't something that I'm asking you to do that I'm not willing to do myself. No, they're not my toys on the floor, and I wasn't playing with them, but that's not the issue. The issue is that I'm always there to support my child when something seems to be of a challenge to them. And picking up toys to a child can be just as challenging as any task that an adult might think of in their own life.
Now, Nancy, if parents would like to get in touch with you to ask you either questions or to request your services, how can they do that?
They can do that by email at ncupolo@nicap.rr.com.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And if you would like to learn more about the topic, or if you have a question for Nancy, log on to my website, parentologywithpaula.com.